Last time we saw Charles Lyell bringing in his uniformity principle, which says that everything that happened in the past is just like what's happening now. Even Stephen Jay Gould admitted it's contradicted by geological evidence. But using the cunning of a lawyer, he succeeded in persuading many people that it was true. Having won his audience over to his uniformity principle, he claimed that sediment is forming at the bottom of the oceans at about 1/8 of an inch, or 3 millimeters, every century. The world is almost entirely covered with sedimentary rocks. That is, rocks that were laid down by water. Up to this time, most people had accepted that most of these sediments had been laid down very quickly in Noah's flood, which lasted for about 1 year. Lyell denied that there had been a flood. They were laid down at 3 millimeters every 100 years. So, if we measure the thickness, we can work out how many years it took for those rocks to form. Many of the sedimentary rocks contain fossils. It had usually been assumed that they were the remains of creatures buried alive by vast amounts of sediment in the flood. Lyell said they were creatures which had just died, got slowly covered by sediment, and turned to stone over many years by the pressure of the sediments, mounting slowly above them. Lyell also claimed that certain types of fossils are found in only certain strata of rock. This must mean that when those rocks were laid down, these creatures were dominant on the Earth. Such fossils are called index fossils. Lyell claimed they indicate the period of time when the rocks enclosing them were formed. So, by building up a sequence of creatures from simple to complex, the fossils can give us a record of the sequence of life on the Earth. Lyell went on to construct a geological column with a geological time scale. He looked for the thickest layer of rock anywhere in the world containing the first of the index fossils. These were called the Cambrian rocks, and they were laid down in the Cambrian period. Then he looked for the thickest layer anywhere in the world with the second index fossils. These were called Ordovician rocks, and they were laid down in the Ordovician period. And so the story goes on for each of the index fossils. He then said the thickest layer found for each period must be the thickness of the layer which originally covered the whole Earth. So we add up the total thicknesses of the thickest of every layer. It comes to 11.8 miles, or 18 kilometers. And since sediment has always been laid down at 1/8 of an inch a century, it must have taken 600 million years for all those sediments to be laid down. We can also work out how many millions of years each geological period lasted. The Cambrian works out to a mind-boggling 100 million years, and the Ordovician to 75 million years. And so we have the famous geological timescale. We see it in museums, schools, universities, textbooks. It's the definitive word on the Earth's history, and it wipes out the Bible's timescale and proves it's just a book of myths and fairy stories. But there are some problems which Lyell and his followers ignored, and continue ignoring right up to today. Nowhere in the world can a sequence of rocks be found with all those layers and their index fossils. Nowhere in the world is there anything close to the thickness of sedimentary rocks Lyell got by piling one on top of the other. Most of the rock sequences found in the world have only a few of the layers from the geological column. Of these layers, only some are in the right order. Even those in the right order often have intervening layers in the wrong order. And fossils don't form by dead creatures getting slowly covered by sediment. Dead creatures get eaten by scavengers, worms and bacteria, and even their bones get recycled by bacteria eventually. Lyell and his disciples shrugged off these problems. They said the missing strata must have been eroded away, even though there's no evidence of erosion in the sedimentary rock record. The older strata, in the wrong order, must have been pushed over the younger rocks now underneath them, even when there's no evidence for any overthrusting and the layers seem to lie seamlessly one on top of the other. As Gould said, to circumvent this literal appearance, Lyell imposed his imagination upon the evidence. Lyell was not the white knight of truth and fieldwork, but a purveyor of a fascinating and particular theory rooted in the steady state of time cycle, his uniformity principle. He tried by rhetoric to equate this substantive theory with rationality and rectitude, and the irony of history is that Lyell won. His version became a semi-official hagiography of geology, preached in textbooks to the present day. Well, the scientific establishment has awarded Lyell's story the best in the field status. So criticism is not allowed. And that's not surprising. The establishment knows that without those millions of years, it's not possible to maintain that evolution could be possible. But perhaps the most interesting point about this whole attempt to discredit the Bible is seen in 2 Peter 3, verse 3 and 4. Scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts and saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation." Lyell and his colleagues were preaching exactly this message, trying to discredit the Bible by the uniformity principle. Everything that happened in the past is just like what is happening now. And the next 2 verses tell us exactly why this message was being preached. For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water, and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. The whole aim of the uniformity principle and its millions of years was to set down Mosaic geology and deny that the flood ever happened. In attempting to discredit the Bible, Lyell confirmed it by fulfilling one of its prophecies. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and press the bell so that you'll be notified as I release new movies. If you'd like to support this project, you're welcome to do so through Patreon. Find a link on my channel banner and in the description below.